In this festive version of our photography review show, we're going to be looking at 67 photos from 23 photographers. Hello everyone and welcome back to the final episode of the photography review show in 2021. For those who don't know me, my name is Jakub and I'm a professional photographer based in West Sussex, England. Now, as this is our final show, we want to make it a little bit special, so it's going to have a little bit of festive feel. However, the rest is pretty much same. We have over 23 photographers, 67 photos, and once again we're going to take the show and divide it between two parts. We're going to look at the landscape photographers first, and then we're going to look at the rest of the photographers after. Now, as we have that many photographers, we want to move on. However, we have two things to look at before we're going to start with the reviews. Number one is a reminder about our Facebook photography group called Clever Photographer Academy. If you haven't joined us yet, make sure you head there, come and join us. We talk a lot about photography, we do a regular photography competition, we answer your photography questions, and we review your photos throughout the week. So if you haven't joined us, make sure you head there and join us right now. The second thing we're gonna do, we're gonna look at the photographer of the week from the past episode. So let's head to it and let's start with that right now. And here we are introducing the photographer of the week. This week our photographer of the week is Petr Kovar. He's from Czech Republic, from beautiful, beautiful country full of incredible landscape. And we already kind of sent the text around. However, just to kind of reminder is Petr is a true landscape photographer. As I was saying in my review all this photo, they are super powerful, full of beautiful landscape elements like mountain, forests, rivers, trees, castles, flowers, and so on. And then he takes all these elements and mix them with additional kind of elements like sun and sunrise and fog and clouds, and it just really works. Now, I was already mentioning when you're photographing such a complex scenes, it's really important to find a way how you can make it simpler for the viewer. And the way Petr does it is that he really use the composition elements very cleverly. He's really smart around it, how he goes. Lots of leading lines, which are not always completely visible. It just kind of reminds me his capture where he just used the grass and the way the grass is kind of laying down. And it really just works. For example, on this example right here, let's see if I can actually find the photo right here. This, I think it's really smart. Obviously, you don't have that kind of traditional leading line, which would be like a road or track or path, where instead he's using the shape of the flower, and I think it just really worked. Not only that, he's using rule of thirds and the kind of borders, and it just really works. So we are really happy to introduce Petr's work as being our photographer of the week. His work is incredible. If you have a time, make sure you check his website on peterkovar.eu. You can also check out his Instagram. Make sure you give him a like and follow him right there. Or you can also check his photos on the website called PhotoCrowd. Lots of photos there. As you can see, he won over 1,000 awards there, and I'm not very surprised. I think the images are incredible. And there you have it. So Petr, well done. Thank you very much for joining us. And for all of you, if you want to be a photographer of the week, all you have to do is to submit your photos, and then obviously it's not always landscape photographers. We had portrait photographers, pet photographers, still life photographers. So really it's open very much to any photography. The goal is to take your best photos, send them over, get them reviewed, and then the chance is open for everyone. So there you have it. Petr, our photographer of the week. Let's jump to the reviewing. and it's time to get to it. So we have 10 landscape photographers in front of us in this first part of our photography review show. Once again, we are inside of the Lightroom CC. Quite often I get the question asked about what is the software we're using. So this is Lightroom CC. We're using the little library module here on the side, and obviously I have all the previous episodes here, and then we kind of just going in between the different albums where we're looking at the different photographers. So first photographer, Alex, two pictures, two beautiful pictures right here. So let's have a look at them. First impression, this one is absolutely stunning, Alex. Well done. Obviously, this I believe is Utah. Stunning sun with the kind of sunburst coming out. One thing which kind of struck me is the sensor dust here, something maybe what can be really easily fixed, but other than that, it's a lovely photo. And then looking at this one, beautiful mountain with the epic sky at the back and quite nice foreground created by this village. So both lovely photos. So let's look at them. Let's see if we have any information about the photos, and we do. So let's look at your setting first of all. Here we are with the ISO 100. You were using 19mm lens, f16, 1/40th of a second. So I think the setting is spot on. Obviously ISO 100, keeping it nice and sharp without any noise. F16 to make sure that you get this kind of sunburst really works. 1/40th of a second. I'm assuming you are using tripod anyway, so it's not really a big deal. I think it's perfectly fine. If not, then 1/40th of a second. If you have kind of one of the recent cameras, would be fine to be handheld anyway. So in overall, I really like the image. As I say, the only thing which kind of popping at me is this sensor dust right here. It can be really easily removed. If you need a manual for it, there is a little video in the description here where I kind of show you how it's done. But basically, you just use this little tool here, and then you can visualize the spots, and you have fair bit, and obviously that happens when you use something above f11, f12. The further you go, f22 including, you really get a lot of these being visible. You see, when I look at it like this, I really only notice this one here, but when I switch on the visualize spots, you can see how many there are. So let's just switch on this one for a moment, and then we can come back to it later. Anyway, technically, other than that, I really like this, how you capture the sun. It's very nice. Obviously, there is not much details in it, so you went for the kind of glow effect, which I think it works quite well in this case. So lovely light, lovely sharpness on this kind of foreground on the rocks, so well done there as well. And in overall, I think technically this photo is very well done. Talking about technical part of the image right here, let's have a look again on your settings. So you're keeping the ISO nice and low, which I think is really important. F7 is perfect for this type of photography. Obviously nothing is near to you anyway, so you don't have to worry about any kind of depth of field. And 1/500th of a second is fine as well. Everything freeze, including the sky. So in overall, I think technically it's quite nice done. There is level of sharpness all the way through the image, which is quite nice. Let's see again if you manage to remove the sensor dust here, and yeah, there isn't any sensor dust visible on this one, so well done. And I think technically it's a nice light. I think it's a little bit flat when it comes to the actual valley. There is no kind of much difference between the different parts. Everything is lit in the same way. However, it's technically quite well done. Talking about composition, I think this one works really well. I think it's really well done. Obviously, it's a kind of quite well-known view with quite lovely capture with the sun going through the actual arch. So in overall, it really worked. Obviously, it's a little bit of a shame for the sky that it's just a gradient, but absolutely nothing you can do about it. It's still very lovely. The warmth coming through works really well. And in overall, I think composition-wise, it's really well done, Alex. Talking about this one, to be honest, I think there is just a little bit too much of the sky. I understand that it's probably like almost the main subject here because of the drama. However, I think if you would have cut it a little bit, it wouldn't really take anything away. I'm thinking more about the kind of panoramatic crop, something like 16 or 9. And if you would maybe keep it like this, it would be perfectly enough. You know, we always talk about composition and saying that the parts, you need to kind of keep an eye on the parts which don't really add anything to the story of the image. And to be honest, this is the part where the drama is, so you totally want to keep it in, but these parts are just extra. There's nothing really happening there. And no, not only that, as they are really bright, probably the brightest part of the image itself, it takes lots of attention away from the image, so you just wanna maybe crop some of it away. Talking about post-processing, absolutely nothing to add here. I think it's lovely. The only thing I would keep an eye on is the sensor dust again. Obviously, when you have a capture like this, you really don't want to keep the sensor dust on, especially if you would go ahead and print this. It would be really visible. And as you can see, it just takes me a few seconds to remove the sensor dust and it's done. And the picture is pretty much ready to go. Only thing you could do kind of stronger gradient here just to close the picture a little bit more by using the masking tool and linear gradient right here. And maybe just bring the exposure down a little. So that way, again, you bring your main focus on this part of the image. You could add a little bit of a blue there. And that's about it. So post-processing wise, this one is great. Nothing I can add here. On this one, we already talked about my idea of cropping it more to the panorama, which would be the 16:9. So let's say something like this. And then I think we need to kind of break down a little bit of the flatness of the landscape. So I would definitely start by maybe doing a little bit of a vignetting right here. And then what you need to do is to use the mask and maybe a brush and start by adding maybe a little bit of a shadows or a little bit of the darkness. So some of the, there you go, something like this. I think would help. And you could do something similar. Let's see if we can copy, create new ones with the brush. And again, into the actual clouds, maybe not that strong, but just kind of add a little bit more contrast into the sky quite often helps. And then equally, you want to do the same with the other side. You just want to create a little bit of extra brightness in certain parts of the image. So maybe something like this, and this, and this. And if it's too bright, you can just lower it down, and you can again do the similar for the sky itself, just to add a little bit of extra contrast. Not that bright, something like this, and there you have it. Although, of course, you could again paint with the brush and maybe add a little bit of contrast to some parts of the image. Specifically, I think the mountains would really benefit out of it. Also, what works is to add a little bit of clarity to the mountains, so then they become a little bit more defined. In overall, looking at both of the images, Alex, I really like them. Well done to you. Thank you for sending them over. They're both great, and really just keep an eye on the composition when it comes to the parts which may be not that important for the whole story, and then on your sensor dust. Again, anything above F12, F11 starts to really bring them up, and they can be visible and then even damage your photo prints. Moving to the next photographer, let's move to the photographer number 2. Andres, we have 2 images from you, so let's have a look at them. So first one, just a kind of first impression, nice kind of storytelling picture with the leading line, a nice interesting color on the building. However, either you did a bit too much of a post-processing, or you done some sky replacement which is really visible. Either or, there is something not really right with the image on these parts, so we can have a look at it in a second. On this one, lovely picture. However, when I zoom in, it really seems that it's a little bit blurry. You see the mountain specifically, and these parts, it just seems that they are really, really soft on the edge of blur. Stunning aurora here above the mountain, which is looking really, really cool, but it's just lacking a little bit of a sharpness. So let's jump to it. Starting with this one, let's see if we have any information. Captured by Nikon, ISO 110, perfect, f3.5, 1/30th of a second. So f3.5, I wonder why did you went for this f-stop, because there is not really there are not really elements here where you could use depth of field that much. Maybe because you were trying to bring the shutter speed a little bit faster so you can handle it. Obviously, there are two different scenarios you could do here. You could use a tripod and use the f-stop, which would be more ideal for this scene, which I think in your case would be somewhere between 7 to 11 to make sure that you have everything nice and sharp. Next option would be increase your ISO, and then that way you can have a faster shutter speed and it could be easier to handheld if you don't have a tripod. So that's just kind of something to start there. Again, I'm not 100% sure about the sky just because I think it's really visible if you've done any changes to it. It's also really defined, so it's kind of really sharp, so I'm not sure if it 100% matches the scene. However, the rest of the image is great. There is a sharpness all the way here. I really like the colors, I like the exposure, and it's, again, I really like the story. I really like what you're trying to do here. It's just some parts are a little bit visible. Some of the mistakes are a little bit visible when it comes to the technical point of view. Talking about this one, ISO 1600, which for this kind of photography is perfectly fine. Again, really low f-stop, f3.5, which again, at this time of the night, it doesn't really make sense to lower your f-stop that much because you will have to use a long exposure anyway, and you will need a tripod for this anyway. So I would go somewhere again around f7, f9, just to make sure that everything is sharp, and double check. Obviously, with your shutter speed, you want to make sure that the shutter speed is fast enough so you get nice and sharp stars. But for me anyway, this image is all about the northern light behind the mountains. So in overall, the setting isn't necessarily wrong. What I think is the biggest kind of downfall of this image is the sharpness. Now again, this could be maybe because of a transition to the JPEG, so maybe in reality it's much sharper. However, the version I'm looking at seems to be a really soft undress, so just something to look out for the next time. Making sure that you're using sturdy tripod, that you're using remote control or timers, so the shutter speed kind of switch itself on without you touching the camera, and then really kind of making sure that the camera stay as steady as possible. Now, if it's really windy and so on, there are different techniques of how you can make sure the tripod kind of stay down. You can also kind of protect the tripod and the camera with the body and so on. So different kind of ways how you can approach this. Let's talk about composition. I actually really like the composition on this one. Although first thing I would do, I would make sure that the horizon is straight. Which can be either done in the cropping tool or it can be done in a geometry in edit here. So we can just use the upright tool and click on auto, and that usually does the job for us. We can just tilt it back a little bit. And then obviously when it comes to composition, I know that this rock is probably important for you, but I think when it comes to balance of the composition, either you would have to go this way. So you get your road on your lower third, so that is much more balanced composition. Or the other way you could go, if you wouldn't be that worried about this mountain, you could make much more balance by creating a scene like this, where the path and the person is kind of all the way through. So those are the kind of two options I would go for. Definitely I would make sure the horizon is straight, just so it all kind of makes sense. Other than that, I think it's well thought. I love the person, I love the road, lots of composition elements there, well done. Talking about this one, yeah, I think it's really difficult to kind of keep looking at it. Specifically when there is the softness in foreground. There's also some really darker areas. Let's see if we could kind of push up the shadows and see what we have in front of us. This could have been really nice foreground element. This not as much. Also with these kind of lights, it takes lots of attention away from the actual northern lights. So it's just difficult to say. Not a bad idea. Foreground, kind of middle ground, background, but just not 100% there. Talking about post-processing, so level it up, definitely. Take off a little bit of the sharpness in the sky, which can be really easily done by the masking tool. So just gonna, you can, for example, select the sky. And once you select the sky, you can simply just lower the clarity, which will make the sky a little bit softer. You can brighten it a bit just to kind of adjust it towards the color of the scene, and that usually helps. Let's see if we add a little bit of the blue or yellow. Blue would help us, and that's it. And then we can add one more mask and maybe bring the viewer more towards the actual center of the image. So to do something like this, and it's also something really interesting. Also keep an eye on a white balance. I think on this picture it kind of works. Let's just quickly check on auto. I think you have it right. There's nothing really to adjust here, and in overall it's quite nice picture. Moving on this one, post-processing, again making sure that it's straight in geometry, starting by using the auto and see what it does. So that didn't help us much. So then in cropping, we can just rotate it a little bit and do maybe something like this and see if that would help. And yeah, I think the rest of it is quite nice. You know, it's quite natural. I really like what you've done with the highlights and shadows. It's just next time, you really need to make sure that the photo is sharp. If you have it sharper, make sure you send it to us, because I would love to see it, because other than that, it's epic scene, and well done for capturing it. So, Andres, thank you very much for sending us your photo. I can't wait to see more of them in the future. Until then, take care. And we're moving on the next photographer. Dalecga, we have a Dalecga. We have 3 pictures from you, and usually we only review 2. So let's not do this one this week. If you want me to review it, send it for the next show and we can review it there. And let's look at those 2. So let's start right here. First, we have this one, more in a portrait mode. When it comes to kind of first impression, I really like what you've done here. I think it's quite nice composition. I think the flowers together with the green create really nice kind of frame in it. And I think it really works quite well. And it's nicely done. On this one, absolutely love the reflection. Beautiful capture of the mountains. A little bit what can be done in the post-processing. I would crop it a little bit differently, but in overall also very lovely photo. So let's talk about this one first. Let's see if we have any details. And sadly we don't. If you can in the future, try to send us the photos with information about how you capture it. That way we can give you a little bit more advice on how to do better technically in the future. Talking about this one, let's see if we have any details, and we don't either, which is a little bit of a shame. But anyway, let's kind of see if we can see some of it. I really like the sharpness. I also quite like the diffused light. I think it works quite well. There is a little bit of the kind of different light spots, which is quite nicely done. Other than that, technically, I think it's okay. Talking about this one, again, a little bit of a shame that it's really low quality JPEG. So when I zoom in, you see how I almost lose all the details. They become really pixelated. But from the kind of first look, it seems quite sharp. The light is maybe not the most interesting on the world, because you obviously have a blue sky and lots of glow coming from here. So just kind of for the next time, it's always better to photograph at the different times of the day when the light is a little bit more pleasing, but still the scene is very epic, and I'm aware that it's not always possible. Talking about composition, this works quite well. Let's see with the cropping. I would maybe crop a little bit of the bottom away. Let's just unlock this. Again and again, a little bit of the top away. Simply because it really is about the window itself. It's not really about the grass or about too much of a wall. And the idea with the composition is always remove as much as is not needed, or it's not important for the storytelling. So I think this would be great. Again, we want to make sure in geometry that we are straight on picture like this, so you can just level it up a little bit. And other than that, it's very nice, very interesting. Love the contrast, love the colors, and well done. Composition wise on this one, I totally get what you were trying to do with the foreground here with the stones. However, they are a little bit too small and a little bit too close to the edge. So in this case, as they're not really working that much for you, reason being you have this epic forest and mountains, and then you just have a too few stones. So either I would have go lower and capture more of them, or I would avoid them completely, and then in that case just crop it differently. So again, if I unlock this, what I would have done something like this. And when you do that, suddenly you're getting much stronger composition, maybe also a little bit here, focusing totally on the mountain, on the main subject. The reflection makes it really balanced. The positioning of the reflection in the middle of the image really work in this case. And I think composition wise like this, it's perfect. Post-processing on this one, what I would do, I would add a little bit of a vignette again right here. I would maybe add a little bit of mask and radial gradient and just really highlight the window again, just pointing the view, edit. So maybe just something like this. And then you can do the similar thing with the brush, the good old dodge and burn. So making some areas of the image brighter and some areas of the image, let's see, some areas darker. So we done the brighter part, and then we can do another one with the brush, bringing the exposure down and just kind of darkening some parts. And that's way too much, so we can just bring it up a little bit. And this is something what I would do with this image. With this image, just keep an eye on your white balance. It's kind of pointing towards a green a lot. I think with this quality of the image, I don't know if it will be able to fix it, but not that much temperature, but definitely keep an eye on your tint. Generally, when you capture image where there is lots of blue, lots of green, lots of yellow, the camera kind of take it and start to push the tint inside of other colors. So quite often you get the green inside of the blues and so on. So just keeping an eye on that. And other than that, I think it's perfectly fine. So Dalecga, thank you very much for sending us your images. It was lovely to review them. Some stunning captures there. And if you have more, make sure you send them in the future. We would love to see them. So moving on, the next photographer, we have a Greg. Greg, train photography, my most favorite. Back again with stunning images. Love what's done here. Let's see if this is by drone. And it looks like it is. And this one doesn't have information, but with the height like this, I assume it's a drone too. So let's talk about the two images. Loving this one. A really nice shot, clean foreground pointing towards the train with lovely little forest, lots of colors, quite nice sky, lovely details in the actual steam right here and here, and in overall really lovely capture. Talking about this one, a little bit more complex situation here, more is happening obviously. I wonder if it was like a two trains or then so there is lots of fog coming through. So obviously that's your kind of main subject, that's the whole story of it. So I wonder if I would maybe crop this part away, but we can talk about it through the review. So talking about this one, first of all, let's have a look at your settings. Obviously drone, we are a little bit of limited what we can do. Keeping the ISO on 100 is quite smart thing to do, and it should be quite easy in a daylight situation like this. Other than that, it seems, that's way too close. It seems really sharp, so that's nice. Again, I like the texture in the actual steam, texture in a field, nice texture in the sky. In overall, well done here when it comes to the technical part. Keep an eye on the geometry again, just to make sure that everything is nice and sorted. Let's just quickly check it out. In geometry and trying the auto, and it doesn't work, of course, so I think it's all good here. Moving on, this image right here, much less light here, which is a bit sad, but I totally understand that it's not possible to always work around with it. When I also go closer, I see quite lots of noise in the darker areas of the image, so I wonder what happened to the drone. Also, when I look on these parts, it's starting to be really soft and a bit out of focus. So again, just something to kind of keep an eye on. So the sharpness on the trains is good. However, noise coming over with probably lower light situation, and the foreground, again, a little bit out of focus. So a little bit softer than the first image. From my point of view, I think because of the light situation, but just something to kind of keep an eye on. Composition-wise, this one I absolutely love. Would I maybe like a little bit more space in the front of the train? Yes, maybe being a little bit more like this, but then this creates really nice leading lines. So I think in overall, Greg, this is a lovely capture, and I wouldn't do nothing to it. I think it's stunning. I think it really works. And it's great. Talking about this one, there would be parts I would probably crop away. Let's just see if we could push it a little bit. Unlock this and maybe do something like this here. Simply because I think these parts are just not really interesting. And again, it's a complex situation, fair bit of to look at. And again, I think the train with the two trains are really the main subject. I wonder if we could go even closer, but then we're really getting close to these parts. But yeah, we really want to bring the viewer towards the train and towards what's happening there. So if we would push it even further and get something like this, I think it's a little bit stronger than what you had, but still they're both lovely images. It's just something to kind of keep an eye on. Post-processing wise, I think this one has a lot of green, so I would keep an eye on your white balance there. Let's see if we add auto, we can definitely bring down the temperature. However, the tint, I think you can really see how it helped to the image. So if I click on this eye, have a look at this detail, for example, you see how the green tint is coming through on these parts. And when I click on it, it really helps to remove some of that. Quite often, and I think with drones as well as maybe older type of cameras, when there is lots of main color on the image, things like lots of blue skies, lots of green grass and forests, quite often the camera starts to take that color and push it in the other colors in the image. So it just happens, and then it's really important to keep an eye on your white balance for this. Other than that, adjusting the white balance, I would totally leave this because I think it's brilliant. Talking about this one again, keep an eye on your white balance. Let's see what would auto do. And I think it helps to add a little bit of warmth here. And as there is not much light happening around, we can obviously help to it a little bit with like a vignette. And then with the brush and masking, we can maybe just again highlight a little bit more the main subject of the story, which is definitely the train. And similarly, we can work on the steam and again highlighting it just a little bit to the point when that really become a really kind of main subject. You could use the linear gradient and take away some of the attention from the field here as well, and maybe do the similar thing from the other side. And then you really start to focus and bring the viewer on the actual train, and there you have it. So anyway, Greg, always a pleasure to see train photos. Yours are amazing. Thank you very much for sending us over to them. Have a happy holidays, and I hope to see more of your pictures in next year. Moving on, the next photographer, we have a John Wilson. John, thank you very much for sending us 2 photos. Let's have a look at them. John, first one right here, a really epic kind of sunset over sea. Hope so. It's almost on a kind of edge of being able to recognize it. Lots of texture in the water, but really nice colors with the bird. I think it really works there, John. And then moving on the next one, we have this pier here. Again, very lovely photo with lots of details. Really nice and panoramic capture. Well done there. So let's talk about it. Let's have a look if we have any information. We don't hear or hear. It's just a really shame, John. As always, for the future, if you want even more advice and more help, it's good to include the camera information in the image. So that way we can kind of tell you, and I can tell you what could be done a bit differently. Technically this, I mean, the bird is sharp, so that's quite nice. Lots of texture in the water, which is kind of something different than what's usually done these days. I mean, lots of photographers would be going for smooth water, but still I think it works quite well. There is a really nice light work right here, and the sky I think works quite nicely as well. And in overall it's a little bit abstract, but it's well done. Talking about this one, again, no information. However, you can kind of see all the details on the pier, so well done. The water is a little bit calmer in this case, so we're getting a little bit of a reflection, and generally it's very nice. The light is a little bit boring. That's how it is when we go to some of these locations. Sometimes we are not lucky. Obviously, if you would have used a little bit longer exposure, you could maybe get a little bit more of the reflection, but in overall, technically, I think it's quite well done. Composition, this is a little bit different image than usual, but I think the composition really works here, John, so well done. I like the thirds. I like how you have this on your bottom third, and then the sky, the main subject, is on your higher thirds. The bird there really adds like a focal point, which then really improves the composition and the overall story. Because of the bird, people are easily able to say that it's a sea and obviously the sunset and so on. So I think it works quite well. On this one, composition, I think you just touch too tight for me. I think it would help if there would be a little bit of space on the sides. Other than that, I think it's quite nice. You know, I'm a big fan of panoramic pictures. This one is good as well. It's almost going towards like a monotone capture, but as a composition goes, I think it's nicely done. Post-processing, not much I can say on this one. Obviously, it's a specific edit. Full of drama, nice colors, so we leave it there, John. And on this one, it's almost on the edge of turning it black and white, which could do really something extra here. Maybe pushing the whites a bit and pushing the blacks down, adjusting the contrast, and then maybe you could do the kind of bright bottom. Let's see if we can just lower this and then increase the exposure. And then do the similar in the sky. Let's see if we can select the sky. And again, increase the exposure there. So something like this. And right away, you're getting this really kind of interesting image. Really black and white, contrasty. The light, suddenly, when you remove the colors, isn't as important. And you're getting something really special, John. So this is what I would do. I would maybe push it a little bit brighter on the bottom as well, just to kind of balance it all the way. And just take it from there. I think in overall, it's a lovely image and something I can totally imagine being hanging on my walls. So, John, well done. Thank you for sending us your photos and take care. Moving on, the next photographer, we have Markus. We have one picture from him. Markus, I feel like I've seen this road before, but then again, I'm sure there is lots of these roads all over Europe. So let's have a look at it. I know there is no information there because I got it from Facebook. As always, Markus, if you have a time, make sure you upload the photos into the website, so that way we have all the information and we can provide as good feedback as possible. In overall, my first impression, really like it. Really dramatic, black and white, monotone scene with lots of kind of snow and texture, and overall I think it really works. Technically, I really love the sharpness and the light. Obviously, turning it to black and white helps here. The snow and the contrast between the trees really works. So well done there. The composition-wise, I think the leading line around really works. Since this part is already cropped, I would probably crop the other part as well and do something like this. Just again, kind of creating a little bit more balance and then bringing the focus on the center of the image. I think if both of the roads would be open and visible, then maybe I wouldn't go for it, but in this case I would, and just make it a little bit more balanced in overall. I really like the snow effect. I think it works. It really looks like an epic kind of almost snowstorm, and Markus, I think you done super well here. I'm really happy with the image. Post-processing, lots of thought went into this. I think your whites and everything really works. The dodge and burn and the contrast is very lovely. So in overall, Markus, thank you very much for sending us this photo. Take care, and I hope to see more of your images in the group or in our show in upcoming weeks. Okay, moving on the next photographer, we have a Michael. Michael, we have two photos from you. This one with a lovely sunset through the palms, quite interesting view. And this one right here with the birds, with the sky, and with the view in the village. So let's talk about them. Starting with the technical point, do we have information? We have for at least one of them. So looking at your ISO, always keep it as close as to 100 as possible. So well done there. F8 is perfect for this scene. Not much of a depth of field. You can work here anyway. So well done there. 1/640th of a second, I think, works as well. So in overall, really well done here. on this one, lovely light. I can see the palms are sharp, but sadly it's really low kind of size of the image, so I'm getting lots of pixelation on the top of the image here. I hope you can see it when I zoom in. So it's a little bit difficult for me to say if everything is the way it should be. However, there is a sharpness by looking at it like this. I suspect maybe there was a sky replacement happening here, because I see lots of glow around the trees. If not, then maybe the editing is just pushed a little bit too much further. But in overall, it's quite nice image here. Composition, I think when it comes to cityscape like this, I always prefer to have the walls and everything straight, and that's one thing I would probably pick here. I think your whole image is falling towards the forward, especially with like a lens of 18 millimeters. You should be able to capture the whole scene. Even sometimes you have to do something like a ventorama, when you take 2 or 3 pictures above each other and then connect them in Facebook, Photoshop or Lightroom. That's just something to kind of keep an eye on. So when it comes to composition, I think it's lovely. The leading line here, the framing, the birds, the cathedral works really well. It's just I would take care of the kind of falling forward. Now we can try to see if maybe auto would help, and with a little bit of luck and a little bit of cropping, it actually does help. Let's have a look. Yeah, something like this is a little bit better. It's not 100% sure still, so let's see if we're gonna use the guidelines here and here. Yep, there you have it. So it's a little bit better. Then of course we're losing a little bit of the bottom, but we can always bring it down and maybe do something like this, and it looks so much more natural. Of course, ideally you would have captured a little bit more of the bottom, but it's still quite nicely done. Really nice frames, really nice view of the cathedral. So composition, I think it really works. Talking about composition on this one, I think I totally get what you're trying to do to bring the feel of it. I think the balance is there. However, I'm not a big fan of this kind of cutting elements off like this here. Something what we call confusing foreground element, and something to really kind of try to stay away from it, because for us as a photographer, when we were there, obviously we know exactly what was happening on the scene, so sometimes the photo makes sense, where for somebody who never been there, it just gets confusing. It can be trees, cars, buildings, lamppost, whatever just kind of poke from out of nowhere. It's ideally you kind of try to get reduce of it. So in this case, I think it would really help if you would have a little bit of foreground, but that's just me. Other than that, I think this the cross works quite well. I think your framing of the horizon works really well as well, although you're getting a little bit in a U shape here, so it's again tilting a little bit, so something to keep an eye on. But in overall, well done there. Let's see if we would add a little bit of geometry, if it would help us, and not really that much. However, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Post-processing, we done the cropping here. Maybe I would add a little vignette in the effects here, just to bring again the attention towards the kind of church. The birds works, everything works. In overall, beautiful, beautiful photo. Talking about this one, white balance going a little bit in the purple, but I think it really works. The golden light works really well. The silhouette of the trees works really well. So in overall, this is beautiful picture, Michael, as well. Thank you very much for sharing them both with us, and I hope to see more of your pictures in the near future. Moving on to the next photographer, Michael. Michael, we have 2 images from you. So let's look at them. Michael, first one, again, epic landscape with a beautiful, beautiful sky. Lots of drama happening, lots of colors, lots of different lights. So well done here. And this one, even more epic. So obviously marina with almost silhouette-like look, with a huge sun kind of setting behind the horizon or rising, depending of the view. Both of them lovely, lovely images. So let's have a look at the settings. Again, we are here, ISO 100, perfect, f11, great, especially when you have this grass nearby. You want to make sure that everything is sharp all the way through. 1/25 of a second is good as well. Obviously, you want to use a tripod in that situation. to make sure that everything is good, but in overall, well done. Everything seems to be sharp, the light is great, the sky is great, you're shooting at the right time of the day, exposure seems to be good as well, so in overall, well done there. Now, what about this one? Even better. ISO 160, f14, 1/15 of a second. I wonder how with 1/15 of a second you got this much of a defined sun here. But still, very nice. It really works. The only thing I'm kind of keep seeing here is a little bit of a sensor dust, which brings... usually appears when you go above kind of F11, F12, so F14 start to do that. Really easy to remove. There is a little video under this description where you can see how it's done, but it's really just using this kind of healing brush. You can click on visualize spots and it kind of shows you the spots. You see this one we were looking at right away from the beginning. Let's see, something like this, but there are others which are sometimes not visible, but if you would want to print this picture, they would come out on the prints from my own experience, so definitely keep an eye on it. You can see it just takes few moments to remove them and it helps tremendously, so that's something what I would do. Composition, this one is very, very complex. Obviously, for me, the main subject is the sky because it's totally epic. I think the whole foreground and the leading line works here, although I would have probably add a little bit less of it. The focal point and the balance really works, so I think it's really nicely done. Just maybe the leading line here could be just positioned differently, but in overall, I really like it. Michael and I have not much add to it. Here, placing the sun in the middle is really smart. Also kind of creating almost silhouette effect on the boats, I think really works as well, especially when they kind of half cut. Once you start to introduce this silhouette effect or look, people stop worrying about items being half cut or missing, and by looking at it, by looking at the shape, people easily recognize what is it they're looking at, and the brain right away is kind of there, and you don't need to add anything else to help to it. So I think overall, well done. When it comes to post-processing, again, really well done here. Keep an eye on your white balance. Let's just quickly shoot from here. Actually, I think your white balance is spot on. Exposure is good. Your shadows, highlights, quite nicely open. Really like the light at the back here, so I think very well done here, and absolutely nothing to add here. I think it's super capture. Only thing, again, keep an eye on the sensor dust and keep shooting, Michael, because your pictures are great. Moving on, the next photographer, we have a Valeryan. Valeryan, you sent us several images. However, we can only go through 2 or 3. So we're going to go through 2, and I kept this one to just kind of show you the difference between the different angle you captured. So talking about this one, I think again, from my kind of first impression, I think you need to keep an eye on the composition, making sure that the composition is simple, that you're using simple composition elements like a focal point and leading lines and so on, so we can have a look at it in a moment. This one is a lovely winter scene with a little bit of leading line, little bit of kind of different subjects, foreground, middle ground, so I think it works quite well. So let's have a look at it technically. Starting with this one, technically, ISO 100, perfect setting, f7, perfect, 1/20th of a second, so it could be even photographed handheld, with a little bit of sun coming from the side, lovely exposure, so nothing wrong there, lots of details, so well done on this one, nothing I would change. Talking about this one, again, ISO 100, f5, 1/100th of a second. Obviously, so details are still there. ISO 100 is great, so that way you don't keep adding any additional noise to the image. F5 is a little bit low for this scene. I don't think there is much you can do with the depth of the field, so just something to keep an eye on. 1/100th of a second, I think works as well. Everything is frozen. You could have gone even slower, but in overall still a lovely and well captured image. Well, yeah, when it comes to composition, start by doing things simple. So for example, when I'm looking at the scene, it's either all about the mill or maybe all about this part of the image, but there is a lot of stuff around which doesn't really add anything to the composition at all. So for example, what I would do here, I would really crop it down to something like this, and that way we have on a third, we have the mill, we have the leading line, the people, and it's a little bit of a storytelling. Again, we got reduce of some part of the image, which is not important for the whole story. The main story is about the path, people working in a forest, there are some elements like this, and I think it just works. That would be me. Other than that, you have your foreground, you have your leading line, you have your flow in the image. It works. Talking about this one, let's talk about composition on this one. This one, with how it kind of leads through and the flow and the trees being in different height, compared to this one, you can see how much more depth this angle adds to the actual viewer, how much more it feels real compared to this one where it's all flat, and it really kind of makes it feel almost like a painting. The trees again in a similar distance, so it really feels just like flat image. So sometimes the angle is a key, and this is why I like this one a little bit more. But other than that, the leading line is nice. It's a nice kind of capture from the forest, and I think it works as well. You know, not much I would change here. To be honest, I think it all needs to be there, and in overall, it's a lovely picture. Talking about post-processing, keeping an eye on the white balance would be the first thing I would do. But on this picture, I think it's quite good. I think your shadows, they could be opened just a little bit more, just to make sure that we keep some details visible. Pushing a little bit the contrast would be another thing I would do. And other than that, I think it's quite well done. Talking about this one, I really like your one balance in a freeze, so that works quite well. You could go with this one almost in a kind of monotone picture because you don't have that many colors in, but it still works quite nicely. And I think as a scene for like a Christmas, it works really well. You could of course crop it to maybe something like this. Really making it just around about this tree right here, and it becomes a little bit more simple for the viewer, a little bit easier to watch. While you're here, you could add a little bit more of a vignette, and you could definitely maybe with the brush add a little bit of a brightness in some parts, just again making it a little bit more contrasty. But other than that, Valeryan, well done. Thank you very much for sharing your photos. It's a pleasure to review them. If you have more of them, make sure you send them to us. We can't wait to see them. And moving on, the final landscape photographer of the year, we have Zdenek. Zdenek, thank you very much for sending us your photos. If I remember right, I think you live in South Africa. Let's have a look if we have any details here. Not about the location, sadly, but still, it totally looks like more kind of out of Europe capture. So let's talk about it. So starting with this one right here, just a kind of first impression, really like what I'm seeing. A leading line, nice framing, frame in frame, nice texture in the sky, little bit of harsh light, but in overall really lovely. On this one, again, better with the light, we kind of lost the harshness, so you get some nice diffuse light. The flow is a little bit broken by this tree here, so I wonder if you could have gone a little bit towards the center of the road, if that would have helped. Also, it's a little bit of a shame that you're missing a little bit of the top, but in overall, both of them are thought through, so well done on that. So let's have a look on your settings. Talking about this picture right here, ISO 200, f11, 1/200th of a second. So ISO 200, I'm not sure about your camera, but always suggestion is to stay as close as 100 as possible. Specifically in this light condition, absolutely no need to go anything above 100 or the minimum value you have on your camera. F11, yeah, I think in these kind of conditions for this kind of landscape photography, anything between f7.1 to f11 is great. It really depends what you're trying to do. When there are objects which are closer to the camera, I tend to go more higher towards the f11. When there are no objects and it's really kind of undistracted view, I'm going more towards the f7, f8, f9. 1/200 of a second is very fast, so no tripod needed. You can really kind of play around with the framing. So I think in overall your setting is very well done here, and I really like what you've done here. I feel that I've seen these clouds somewhere before, and if I'm right, you've done very well. They look really natural, and I really like what you've done there. So in overall, Zdenek, well done. This is a great picture, technically very, very well captured. On this one, talking about your camera settings, ISO 100, f13, 100 of a second. So your ISO again, perfect. 100th of a second. So I'm not 100% sure about why you went for the f13. Again, even more so because maybe there are some items I can see the bushes closer to the camera. Here, not really. So I would probably bring it down a little, but it's not really that a big deal. Interesting light, and sharpness all the way through. The only thing is that if you've done a sky replacement here, it's a little bit visible. You can see I see pieces of branches coming out here and here. Also, you see a little bit of halo at some parts of the sky. So again, here a little bit as well. Something we're gonna do on the new year, definitely go through the sky replacement basics again in our photography group, Clever Photographer Academy. Zdenek, I feel that you're there already. If you have not, make sure you join us there, because that's what we're going to start right after the new year, going through the basics one more time. We're going to review some of the sky replacement applications to see which one is the best. Hopefully by then also the new Luminar Neo will be out, and we're going to be able to see how much they push it over. So just something to kind of keep an eye on. Composition. I feel like I have touched a lot on it on my kind of initial reaction to it. I think composition wise, this one really works. Again, I think the leading line using the road is really smart. I think the framing, putting the mountain in the middle so it's visible, works really well. I think it just works, and I think this one is really well done. On this one, not much we can do from the post-processing point of view. My suggestion would be to move a little bit towards the side and get a constructive view of the flow. Again, I would also make sure that I get the tree all the way through, especially when it's kind of my foreground element. You don't want it to be kind of cropping away. Obviously, what you could do is you could crop it much tighter, and that way you would kind of, it would look like it was your intention to kind of crop it away, so you can maybe do something like this, and then people wouldn't too much worry. You see, while you do that, it looks like it was purposely done. When we use your view, it looks with this little bit, it looks like you forget about it. Also, again, talking about parts of the image which are really not important for your storytelling, it's totally this part, it's just a dirty road, it doesn't add anything to the view. So I would start by cropping that off. Similarly here, no needed, we can just push it like this, and then we can center the flow in the middle of the image, and I think this view is a much more cleaner, and again, bringing this down, much more interesting like this. Post-processing, what would I do here? Keep an eye on white balance, as I always say. I see a little bit of green kind of popping through, but nothing too much here. Definitely vignette would, I think, really work. It always works on these kind of tunnel views, so I think something like this would be really helpful. And that's about it. Your clouds looks great, everything else looks great. Push a little bit of the contrast and make the overall scene just a little bit softer by bringing down the clarity, as it makes it looks just a little bit more natural. Otherwise, National Geographic shot. Talking about this one, the white balance is kind of strange here. I think it may be to do with the fact that the sky was probably a different color. So you see you have this kind of blue sky which associate immediately with the warmth and brightness, where the rest of the image looks really kind of soft and unsaturated. So I wonder if we would have add a little bit of a yellow, little bit of saturation. In overall, this image would also look really good in black and white. We could then go in effects, really push the vignette down, and then push the contrast, push the blacks, and maybe even whites, and then just work with the brush, maybe adding exposure onto our path. So to do something like this, and then similarly adding more kind of darker areas, and then creating something just a little bit different. Let's here. Auto mask usually also does a good job here, and something like this would make it also really interesting. So there you have it. Zdenek, thank you very much for sending us your photos. It's a pleasure always to see them. If you want to learn a little bit more about the sky replacement, join us in a group after the new year. Until then, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year.
And the same goes for all of you. If you want to join us on the next episode on the 3rd of January 2022, make sure you head to our website, cleverphotographer.com/review, and find all the upcoming dates, the links for the uploads, and all the information you need to join us for our photography show. Now, before we're going to finish this episode, me and the whole Clever Photographer team want to wish you happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and all the best. We can't wait to see you in 2022. And until then, keep shooting.